I'm excited for you to check out this conversation with Tammi Salas. She is somebody who has been able to pull out the creativity in me, and I know she's going to inspire you to do the same. When we get sober, we often have a lot of time and we need to do something with our hands, and practicing creativity can be a way that we can really enhance our recovery. She's going to share about that. She's going to talk about the Unruffled podcast that she runs with her friend Sandra Primo, who's also been on the show here. And we're also going to really dig into gratitude. Of course, we're also going to talk about her story. So here we go. Let's go for a ride with Tammi Salas.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people. People who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
I'm so excited to be talking with you, Tammi Salas. This is a real privilege. I met you several years ago or a couple of years ago now, in a secret Facebook group when you were talking about creativity and you were starting the Recovery Gals Art Exchange. And I certainly did not consider myself an artist or somebody who was creative. And yet I really got a lot out of that experience. And so I really wanted to have you on to talk about your experience with creativity in recovery, because I know it's played a huge role. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
That's
The Recovery Gals Art Exchange, that was Sandra Primo's inspiration. And after I politely stalked her on the internet and became her friend, and now we do lots of things together, but that was her idea, and we kind of wanted to do something together. It felt a little braver to do it together than to do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we created that, where people share and exchange art 4 times a year, on the equinoxes and on the solstices. So right now the spring equinox is coming up, and our theme for that exchange is metamorphosis. And so, women get to create on that theme in any way that they want to, women in recovery or sober curious. And they make the art and put their heart and soul into it, and then they ship it off to a sober sister that receives it, and hopefully they get an exchange in return.
It's such a fun, I want to say experience or experiment, or it was just such an exciting thing for me to do. Like I say, I wasn't somebody who considered myself creative, but it was sort of a foray into, wow, I can really create something beautiful here with, pencil crayons and paints. And it really got fun. And it felt like I was going back to kindergarten again. And it really did help me to sort of explore. And I know that they talk about those coloring books you can buy now, and that 15 minutes of coloring is the equivalent to an hour of meditation. So it really does help us get quiet and use our hands. And I know that was really important to you when you first got sober. You've written about that in a few different places I've read, where really just being able to use your hands, keep them busy, was really important to you when you first got sober. So I want you to help to explain to us, how has creativity fueled your recovery? How has it been a tool for you to stay sober?
I love that question. It's a great one. So, of course, I don't know the path until I look back a little bit, right? And so looking back, I was looking at some old journals that I had. And on January 1st of 2014, a little over a year before I got sober, I committed to a daily practice of making a drawing or a painting or a sketch or a scribble in a journal. And I was going to commit to it for every single day of the year. And my first entry in that journal was the word acceptance, because that was my word for the year. And I didn't know how that would play a part in my story. And I didn't realize that till I looked back a year later at my journal, that was what my first entry was. And so every day that year I was, not every day was I hungover, but I would say a good 90% of the days I was hungover. And I would wake up and I would sit down at the table and I would commit to drawing in that journal or painting or using my coffee and painting or beet juice or whatever I was having. I would make a mark of some kind. That daily kind of time, that time that I carved out every day to sit down at my table and think. And like I said, I was typically hungover or just not feeling great. And so I would think about my life, and I would think about the art was a way to kind of just meditate, I guess, because I didn't meditate, but it was this time to think about like this kind of feeling that I had, this sinking feeling that something wasn't right. And I knew it. And I knew it. I didn't know what it was. I don't even know that I entertained that it was the drinking. I was in such denial, but I knew that I did not like how I was living my life. And
So were you visually expressing how you were feeling inside? Are those the images that you were creating, or were you using words, or how did it look?
It looked really different. So I was trying to listen to that inner voice that said, why don't you make art anymore? You know? So some of it was words, some of it was just using what was handy, what was near me. And that was kind of the thing. I never planned it. I never set out to make something that day. I just sat down and I was like, oh, I have a ballpoint pen. All right, let's do this. I have coffee. I'm going to go grab a paintbrush. Let's do this. So it was a way for me to kind of tap into myself and to just start creating something. Had no idea where the direction was going to go. It was just this time. And sometimes I would spend 5 minutes on it. And sometimes I would sit there and draw and spend a half an hour, an hour. A lot of them were words. Now that you're saying that, a lot of them were words, things I'd heard, some quotes that meant a lot to me. I took a lot of online classes that year with an artist that I really admire named Lisa Congdon. And she did a lot of online classes. And I took a couple workshops in person because she was in San Francisco at the time. But that I just kept experimenting. And in doing that, I shared a little bit on Instagram. And people were like, oh, that's pretty, or, well, that's fun. And there was something about that. I'm a little bit of a person who needs a gold star. I will be honest about that. Like, that's just how I grew up. So that back pat or that like was like, well, maybe I should listen to that thing that's inside of me telling me to sit down and make something. Maybe there's more there. Maybe. And then that just kind of started it. And then so when January 1st of 2015 rolled around, I just hit my bottom the last week of that year, that 2014. And so when January 1st rolled around of 2015, I just thought, I'm going to commit to another year-long practice. And something's going to change this year. But I did not know it was going to be drinking. I didn't know that. Yeah.
So I wanted to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned, you said something about wanting to go back to creativity. So has creativity always played a role in your life since childhood or early years?
I think it was squashed down in my childhood. My mother does not like this story, but I used to write poems and draw pictures. And when I would bring them home, my mom would say, they're so beautiful. You know where you should hang them? And I'd be like, where? You should hang them on the inside of your closet. And I was like, oh, okay. Because she didn't want them out. She didn't want them to mess up her decor. And so there's something inside of me that was like hiding that stuff away. And my mom didn't mean anything by it. She grew up very poor, and to have a nice house meant a lot to her. Yeah. So she didn't know what she did there, but there it was. And so I think I tucked it away a long time ago. And to actually kind of be able to tap into that and to realize I had full control over it, and I have my own house, and I have an old well house that we turned into a studio. I'm like, slowly over time, I just started giving myself permission to do that.
I think that's such an important point to make, that sometimes our parents are fallible people. They are just humans trying to do the best that they can do. And I think that when we can remember that they were just young people trying to do the best they could, making decisions along the way that maybe we as adults in adult brains look back on and think that might not have been the healthiest decision for me, or that really kind of pushed me in this direction, or it changed me. We can point to those things and we can say, interesting, that's what took me in that direction. But then there's never any regret, because we were meant to do all of the things that we were meant to do to get us to this place where we are right now. And I think that that's really helped me in my relationship with my own mother, who I will often do the things like that where I'll share stories and she doesn't like the stories. And it's
Right.
like, but I know you don't like those stories, Mom, and that's okay, but they need to be expressed because it's part of my life. It's part of my truth. And it's part of why I am the way I am and why I behave the way I do. It's not to point a finger or to cast blame, but there has to be a chance for us as adult grown people in grown minds to be able to look back at the trajectory of our lives and pinpoint different areas and places and points of time that pushed us in another way, or that changed us in some way, or that hurt us in some way, or that affected us in some way. And we have to be able to point to it and create meaning out of that if it's meaningful to us to do so. And I think that I really like the word permission, and you just used it. And I think that's really important in all of our relationships, especially with the one we have with ourselves, allowing ourselves the permission to go there, to go to those painful points that might have hurt us, but that also helped us grow into the amazing people that we are today. So no regret, but certainly a point to be made to look back at those moments. So I think I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I've been wanting to share that for a while. And I know it's hard with parents, especially when our parents are still alive. My mother's still with us. Is your mother still alive too?
Yes.
So there's this thing where, we worry that they might hear our words and feel guilty about what we're saying. And then they feel like they have to take the blame for all of the bad things that happen to us. And I always tell my mother, if you're going to take responsibility for all the terrible things that went on in my life, then you also then have to take responsibility for all of the good things as well. So go ahead, take responsibility for all of it if you have to. I'm not asking you to, but if you're going to take, responsibility, if you're going to feel guilty about the bad things, and you have to feel really good about the good things then too. So that's a way that I've helped to turn it around. So I want to talk about your gratitude practice, because that's another way that that you are creative in your life and you are sharing that with other people. You have an ebook that is beautiful and that is spectacular, and you are growing this tribe of gratitude sisters. So I want you to talk about how gratitude has also played a role in your recovery.
It's my favorite topic. So yes, I would love to talk about that.
Excellent.
So when I started going into the rooms of AA, I got a sponsor, and she assigned me to work with her. In a way, it was not a test, but just an assignment to see if I would follow through. And she said, I would like you to write a 30-item gratitude list for 30 days. And I thought that was preposterous. I thought that was ridiculous. I thought that was over the top. And who does she think she is to ask me to do that? So I resisted, like I resisted many things, because it wasn't my idea, actually. And I liked control of everything. So I wanted to control the idea. But we'll get to that, because I kind of do take control of it in a little bit. But so for 30 days, I sat down and I started writing these lists. And they were really hard at first. So at first, I was always grateful for my sobriety. And then the last thing I think I was grateful for was my health. But in between, I was really struggling to find those other 28 things. But I did it. So that was my morning meditation, became the gratitude list. By the end of the 30 days, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was like, this is brilliant that she asked me to do this, because I can see everything didn't have to be sunshiny on that list. I could be grateful, just to be alive, and to be able to be of service to people, or to be able to go to coffee with someone that needed my help. I could be grateful for that experience, that connection. I started putting things together in a different way, and it shifted the way I thought about the 12-step program. It shifted about the people I thought that attended the 12-step program. It shifted how I looked at people out in the world. It made a huge shift for me.
Can you tell me how it changed the way you felt about the people in the 12-step program specifically? I think that was an interesting thought you had, or point.
Yeah. Well, from that list making, and from listening to podcasts, and to working on a mantra project with Holly Whitaker from Hip Sobriety, there's this saying of everyone is your teacher. And so I started adopting that in my list, like, and in the meetings, and that everyone was my teacher. So if someone was really annoying me, which doesn't sound really super spiritual and all perfect, but people annoy you, right? Mm-hmm. And I would be grateful that I could then meditate while they were speaking. Mm-hmm. I was grateful that I had my notebook to write little dash marks and my anxiety marks. I used to write in my notebook in meetings to keep me in my seat. Mm-hmm. I could be grateful that there was hot tea in the kitchen, that I could get up and excuse myself. I started just shifting the way I looked at everything that was bothering me in my life, or that I thought that everybody else had the problem and it wasn't my problem. It just started to shift the way I thought. Just my thought process started to change.
Beautiful. So then how did you take that experience and create it as something that you're doing in your own work, in your own life?
Well, shortly after then, my sponsor asked me to join a gratitude circle with her, and I don't know how many women were in it at the time, maybe 20, but women I didn't know. And so I was a part of an email chain where we did this gratitude circle, and it was nice and it was good to read their lists, but I needed a bigger connection because I didn't know the women. I can see now that that was me wanting control of the situation, that I wanted my own thing because that's how I want to do it my way. So even that was a lesson that I don't know that I had to leave that circle to get that. But what I did is I'd been kind of hearing Sandra Primo's story I heard her on the Sense Right Now podcast. She was part of a secret Facebook group, and she was one of those people like you hear in the rooms that she had what I wanted, right? Yeah. I wanted what she had. And I kept hearing her, and her story was so similar to mine. And I reached out to her and I said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a gratitude circle. Would you like to join? I'm asking maybe a half a dozen other women. And she was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so we started it. And it's Lara Fraser and Natalie Fairbrook and Caitlin Schumacher. And there's like 6, 7, 8 of us. And so it just became this wonderful place to connect with these women that I was already kind of connecting with, right? And so it shifted I had a personal connection to these women. I cared a little bit more about reading the lists, if I'm being honest, like that I could know them. I knew that they had what their struggles were and what they were sharing in the secret Facebook groups. And so then we did that for a while via email, and then we changed it to another secret Facebook group because there's so many groups, and started sharing that way. But I started illustrating my lists is what happened. I started saying, I'm missing that daily practice that I started of drawing. And so I thought, I don't have time to do both. So I kind of married the two of them.
And so it's amazing because I've seen some of people are posting what they're creating, and these lists are works of art. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, I typically I have a gratitude journal and I just write words in it, but the combination of the artwork with the words, it's really special. And I can tell from everyone that's involved with this, everyone is getting so much out of it. So how can people get involved with Tammy's Gratitude Circle or Tammy's Gratitude Tribe?
So yeah, in November, I decided, since November is a month of Thanksgiving, I thought maybe I'll make a hashtag and see if people want to join in and share their lists on Instagram, because what I was getting from my own little circle, our tiny circle, was seeing other people's lists. And so I created the hashtag Tammy's Gratitude Tribe and asked people to just share it. And it just started blooming into this really beautiful, there's over a couple thousand posts now as of today. But I go there and just look and get inspiration and look at what people are grateful for. When I'm having a hard day, I go look. When I'm having a pity party about something, I go look. And I get inspiration for the artwork. And I've kind of bonded and connected with these other ladies who take it really seriously and make this part of their practice. Yeah. So that was what I did in November. And that was in order to support. I was about ready to release an ebook. And I was a little nervous about doing the thing. And I'm part of a creative group called the Inner Circle with Tiffany Hahn. And Tiffany Hahn was saying, just put out your ebook. You don't have to put out a real book. Because I was going to try to put out a real, solid printed book.
Yeah.
She's like, just make an ebook. Just do it. And I was like, but it's December. There's a lot going on in December. And she was like, And so I just did it. And my husband helped me with some technical things. And on New Year's Day, I put it out.
And I love the title of it. It is My Daily Gratitude Practice, How I Found My Visual Voice. And that is just absolutely beautiful. Your visual voice, that speaks volumes to me. I love it. So where can people find it? I know it's on your website. So TammiSalas.com.
Yeah, that's where they can find it. It's there. And periodically I put it on sale for $11. But it's normally $22. And it's been a really fun way to, I don't know, to get it all out and put it out into the world, also to show yourself as a creative person, like, you do this one thing. I get why my coach, Tiffany Hahn, said, like, put it put it out in the world, because then from there you go to the next thing that you're going to do. You kind of create this bravery as you put every little thing out into the world. And it's proof of life. And I think a lot of what we do in recovery and writing and the art that I make is proof of life. And I love that. I love it, because for so long I was hiding, and writing these things under a blog that nobody could find, and secret. And now I'm living out loud, and it is this, every creative thing that I make is proof that I'm alive.
What a beautiful way to put it. Proof of life. I love that. So let's get started. Let's go back into your story. I want you to start wherever you'd like to start. You can share you shared a little bit in our first few minutes together about your mom, and that I guess she grew up poor. I'm curious, how did you grow up? What was it like when you were a kid? And then let's work our way all the way through so that we can come full circle to where you are today, living your life in creativity and sobriety.
Yeah, I grew up in a middle-class family, suburban. My parents did grow up very poor, so they wanted to provide a nicer life for us, and it was very nice. There was no alcohol in my home growing up. I mean, like one time there was like a beer in our fridge for years, but there was not alcohol, and that was not part of our life, just because my parents just didn't drink. They worked really hard, and both of their families struggled with addiction, and that was just not part of our home life. But when I was, 18, I had some alcohol at a party and got drunk. And my father, I came home and he knew I was drunk, and I got in a lot of trouble. And I basically promised them I wouldn't drink until I was 21. And I didn't. And I kept my word, and I didn't drink. But when I did, finally, I did, and white Zinfandel was the gateway, right? Like it is. It was the gateway wine drug for me. But then I got married, and then my husband at the time had a DUI, and I drove him everywhere.
Did he get a DUI while you were married, or when?
No, before. So then I was in this phase. Oh, I forgot. I've been baptized 3 times.
Okay.
So that's part of my story of being a seeker. So at this phase of my life, when I was married at 23, I was Mormon. And I was in the phase of going to church and finding community, and driving him. And we lived in Durango, Colorado, and he was a cowboy, and we'd go to bars, and that was just my life. But when I left him at age 27, that's kind of when my drinking kicked into high gear.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was making up for lost time. I was no longer going to church. I was very disappointed in the church. That was part of, it was a big part of the story back then, of just felt disillusioned by a lot of things. And I thought, I've been sold a bill of goods my whole life. I've been this good girl, and I want to have some fun.
Yeah.
And I very quickly started drinking to blackout, although I didn't know that's what it was until I read Sarah Hepela's book, Blackout, right before I started going to AA. But at that time, I did not know what was happening. I just thought that's how people drank.
Yeah.
I really thought everyone blacked out. I really thought that you just drank until the night was over.
Yeah. I was just gonna interject there. I was the same, and reading Sarah Hepela's book, it really opened my eyes too. I just thought that was passing out. I thought that was going to sleep. I thought that was okay to drink, and then the next morning not that I thought that it was okay, but that was what I thought everybody experienced when they got really drunk. Like I thought that was just what everybody went through.
Absolutely. Yeah. It never occurred to me that people ended the night differently.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that's what you did. I thought I went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And so I met my husband that I'm married to now. We've been together for almost 20 years. So I met him shortly after I got divorced. I met him in a brown out-ish, and just recently told him that. He did not know that at the time. Mm-hmm. But again, I thought that's just how you did it, and that everybody drank that way. So we got married in 2001, right after 9/11, 3 weeks after 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And on our honeymoon, we were honeymooning up Highway 1 to Big Sur. And before that, we had looked at a wine bar in Bodega Bay along the coast on Northern California. And we decided to buy it. And that was the beginning of my end, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So On that
Just having
honeymoon.
that much access to alcohol all the time, or what do you mean the beginning of your end?
So yeah, for sure. I wasn't really, I mean, I did drink sporadically and black out, but owning a wine bar, it became my job.
Yeah.
It became my job. And so we cut our honeymoon short, went up and bought the shop. 4 months later, we were quit our jobs, sold our home, and we were living underneath the wine bar on the water in Bodega Bay. So it sounded really awesome to people. It sounded really romantic. And it was maybe for a little while. But my story is I very quickly got pregnant, and that was not planned. And I had a really hard time with that. I was not super excited. And being a mom, getting pregnant and not being excited about it is kind of a shameful thing. And
Do you
even
feel
though
like you were not excited about it because you couldn't drink, or for other reasons as well?
at that time, it wasn't the drinking. It was just that I didn't want to be a mom.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think I ever wanted to be a mom. I wasn't sure. My husband was ecstatic. So it was really hard. I almost passed out when I almost fell on the bathroom floor. Like I was not happy.
Wow.
And it's taken me a long time to even say that, because that's really shameful. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I did was, I didn't drink for my pregnancy, but once I had that kid, it was on. Like I was ready to, again, I felt like I was making up for lost time.
Mm-hmm.
So as the wine bar owner, I created events. I created winemakers coming. I created martini nights on Thursday nights across the street. I created a book club so I could drink outside of work. My drinking just kicked up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of my customers were either retired and their children were grown, or had no children by choice. And I didn't know anybody that had a kid. So my husband, the very responsible husband that I have, he became the parent on duty. And this is my job, Steve. He went off to sell real estate. So really the wine bar was all mine. And because it was my job, I took it very seriously. But I started having this allergy to wine. I started having a reaction to drinking. And so
What was your reaction? What were you feeling?
Flushed and sneezing and stuffy and not remembering the end of the evening more often than not. And I went to my doctor and I said, hey, this is what's going on. This was after my son was born. So this was in 2004, maybe 2005. And she said, well, you need to stop drinking. And I said, I can't, because it's my job. And she said, okay, well then let me give you these medications. So I took 3 different medications a day for years until 2015. So for like a decade, to enable me to drink, to help me be able to drink and not have those side effects.
And did they help? Did those pills help?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they did.
Mm-hmm.
It depends how you look at it.
Yeah. I mean, did they help you to not have the allergic reaction to alcohol?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that went on for a long time. I made up, rosé Wednesdays at my house. I just made up excuses to drink all the time. And I threw epic dinner parties several days a week. All of my creative energy went into tablescapes and handwriting my menus and going to Bottle Barn and pairing everything with my recipes. I really got into cooking at the time. I really masked it all as this big, creative, lovely thing I was doing so that I could drink the way I wanted to drink.
And throughout all of this time, was there ever a moment where you wondered, am I drinking safely? Is this normal? Is there a problem here? Like, were there any whispers for you?
There was a whisper in 2014, the year that I was doing all of the journaling. I'd gone to a writer's retreat on Orcas Island with a bunch of writers. I was communicating with one, and I shared with her, because I didn't know her very well and she wasn't in my circle. I said, I think I might drink too much. And she says, well, why don't you try not drinking? And so I went for 16 days. And then I started drinking again. And then that woman stopped talking to me after that. And I still haven't talked to her. So I don't know what the story was, of maybe what her deal was with alcohol, or if I disappointed her, but it was enough to make me think, like, why did she stop talking to me? Yeah. Maybe it was because I stopped maybe because I started drinking again. So that was a tiny little thing that I just thought, but you know what, I brushed that. You just want to bury it because you don't want to think about it too much, because then I was drinking cocktails at home. I'd sold my wine bar. I was at home, wasn't really fulfilled or happy with my life, even though I had a wonderful husband and a great kid and wonderful community. I still was just couldn't live with myself. I would wake up every morning and feel awful. Like I said, mostly hungover, but also just having that horrible feeling of like, I don't like who I am.
I'm just curious, if you don't mind stopping for a second. Can we go into those 16 days? Were there any ahas or revelations or anything that came from you being 16 days sober? And then why did you decide to go back to drinking? Like, I'm curious about that time.
So during that time, I had an assignment from a friend of mine who I'd met at the writer's retreat. She had a magazine and I was doing a centerfold. I was illustrating a centerfold for her. And it was like my first time doing this. I was working with a poet who was also there.
Wow.
And I was really motivated. I got a lot done because I thought, oh, if I don't drink, I could just really focus, because I'm so anxious and nervous about this assignment that I can really, really dig in and get this done. So I think once I got it done, I rewarded myself, right? With drinking.
That makes a lot of sense. But I also love that it planted the seed for what you would do later on in your recovery using creativity. So I love it. Okay, so let's pick back up where you were.
So let's see. So that's where was I?
So 2014, then you decided to go back to drinking, and then now we're in 2014, and you have that assignment.
Yeah. So I did some creative things. Anxiety played a big part of my story. As it does, I think, a lot of people who are in recovery. I was fueling my anxiety every day by drinking, 3 cups of coffee. For me, my body responded in a way which I didn't figure out until a couple years ago when I quit. But I had this anxiety. I knew it wasn't good for me. My husband and son went away for a week after Christmas in 2014, and I basically drank myself from the time they left until New Year's Day. And that was like a physical bottom. I think Sandra and I talk about it on our podcast. Like, my emotional bottom was just, I didn't want to live like that anymore. Like, I don't think you have to drink so much to have a bottom. We talk about it all the time, that we think of your bottom can be a feeling.
Yes.
Very big event. It can be just that you don't want to live like you're living. And that's kind of when I woke up on New Year's Day, and I usually pick a word for the year. And I went to the beach by myself, and I was like, something has got to change. Something. And so I still drank that month of January, but I knew the jig was up. Like, it was something was going to change. Although I fully didn't think it was going to be quitting drinking. I thought my husband should really get his act together and not fight with me when I'm drinking. Because I was like the fight starter, right? But anyhow, so I had a big epic dinner party for one of my friends. My husband and I had a fight, like we usually ended up having, that I would instigate at the end of the evening over something really dumb. And that night I didn't want him to wash the wine glasses. I was going to wash them in the morning. And I usually did that to punish myself in the morning, to think about what I'd done the night before, try to piece it together. He's like, I'll wash them. It's not a big deal. And I got really upset and went to the bed. And I got out a journal, and I was like, I got to write this down, why I'm mad at him, so I'll remember in the morning. And that, to me, was ridiculous, right? Yeah. But I knew that I was going to black out, and I wasn't going to remember why I was mad at him. And so I wrote it down, went to bed. That was on January 29th. I woke up the next morning, and I could not read the journal. Could not read anything that I wrote.
Like, it was illegible?
Yeah. And that was a moment where I was like, oh shit, I've got to stop. I've got to stop what I'm doing.
I'm curious, could you pull anything from what you had written to understand, to be able to understand that it was the wine glasses that you didn't want him washing, and for all those reasons?
That's the only thing I could remember. I don't know that I could pull that from I'd have to go look and find the journal.
Wow.
So I was nursing a hangover for a couple of days. I had my annual physical with my doctor, the one that had prescribed all the meds. I sat down in her waiting room, and I had the intake form. And it said, how many drinks do you have a week on average? And instead of saying the normal 3 to 4 that I'd always answered, I only had 3 to 4 drinks a week. I decided to tell the truth. And I sat there and I was like, what would it be like if I just told her? Like, what would it be like? What would happen? So I wrote down 21 drinks a week, which was not the truth, by the way, but it was the truth, as much truth as I could say.
Yep.
And I was like, that's good. I'm going to tell her that. And so then I went into her office and she looked at my intake sheet, and the look on her face, she just kind of paused and she was like, so what are you drinking? What are you drinking? And I said, I'm just drinking bourbon now. I'm actually drinking Manhattans every night. And she was like, singles or doubles? And I said, doubles. She was like, so 42 drinks a week? And I'm like, I guess. And she looked up bourbon and she's like, okay, let's see what it's made of. Oh, it's made of corn. So that turns into sugar. So maybe some of these, I was having a lot of physical ailments, anxiety attacks, panic attacks. So she was trying to address these things I was coming in for, high blood pressure. And so she said, what if I put you on an elimination diet for 8 weeks? Like, what do you think? And I was like, I don't even know what that is. And she says, oh, you just, we'll take you off alcohol for like 8 weeks, and we'll take you off gluten for 6, and then you'll go 4, you just taper it down. And of course I want the gold star and I want to please her. And I was like, oh, sure, I can do that. And she's like, really? You're okay with starting with alcohol first? And I was like, yeah, that's no problem. So she gives me this plan and takes my labs, and she said, I'd like you to email me and check in with me in 2 weeks when you're getting ready to change and add the gluten in. I'd like to just see how you are. And I'm like, okay. So I leave and kind of don't think about it. But book club is 2 days later. And so on that day, I was like, I need to decide if I'm drinking tonight or not, or if I'm going to do this elimination thing. I've gone 2 whole days without drinking. So I went to book club and wine was flowing. Everybody brings a bottle of wine. Everybody drinks a bottle of wine. And luckily it was on my street, so I could walk home. And I left early that night. I couldn't even stay in the room. And I came home and I told my husband, I said, I think I'm going to quit drinking for 8 weeks. And he was like, okay, because he didn't believe a word I said about anything at that point. And I said, no, I'm really going to do it. And he was like, great, you should. And I did.
Was your husband a drinker as well?
Yeah, he's a normal drinker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so alcohol does not play a negative role in his life.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Mm-hmm.
He's a very normal, moderate, could take it or leave it drinker. That's not my story. So I did, and I have to say, Sarah, like immediately waking up. So that was a Thursday. Waking up that first week without a hangover, it felt like the sun was shining and rainbows and unicorns. And I was like,
birds are chirping.
I have not felt like this in so long. Like I haven't, wow. So I really liked feeling like that. And that very quickly, that's how I started collecting days. It was like Friday nights were hard. And I would text with friends on Friday night, and I would go hiking every Saturday morning. So I'd have an excuse to go to bed and get up. But that's kind of how I did it. Exercise was how I did it, and the elimination diet at first. So those first 7 months were just me hiking and going to bed at like a ridiculously early hour.
And I get that, where sometimes just to be able to string some time together, we have to do what we have to do. So if that means leaving the book club parties, alone, and getting home, getting to bed, and having a plan for first thing Saturday morning. I used to do very early yoga classes on Saturday morning, same kind of idea. And I think that that's such a great way to help people that are watching right now, that are new in sobriety, that are wondering, how do I string together 3 or 4 days? Like I can't get past, that one day where we're super hungover and we're lying in bed going, I'm never going to drink again. Okay, this is it. I know we've all kind of been there. And then all of a sudden we feel better. And it's like, well, one's not going to hurt. And then we go back down that road. And I think so many of us can relate to that, where that's what happens. We feel shitty for a couple of days from a hangover. We feel like we might be able to figure this thing out. And then all of a sudden, once we start to feel better, we can go back into our old patterns. And that's, certainly what happens in a lot of relapses, even in people with years of recovery. You feel so good that you feel like maybe you can reintroduce alcohol into your life. So no, I love the way that you set up your life. I think that's so interesting that you used really sort of health and fitness and nutrition in those early days. When was it then that creativity came back into your life, as far as this trajectory? When did that come back in?
Well, as you know, so when you stop drinking, you have all this time, right? I'm stopping the dinner parties, I'm stopping the shopping and the planning and the making the menus. And you have a lot of time to fill. And something that had been kind of tugging at me my whole life, since I was 18, was that I never graduated from college. So in March, so a month of being sober, I was like, I think I want to go back to school and I want to major in art. And it sounded kind of preposterous. It sounded like, who am I to think that? And I'm 44 years old at the time. I will feel ridiculous. And I did feel that way, like going to admissions and taking a math entry exam and just all of those things. But I had quit when I was 18 because I got a bad grade. I got a first D in my life. And so I quit college after a year. So that's what kind of started. I started making a plan of what to do with my life. And going to school and declaring art as my major felt like a really big deal. I felt so proud of myself. My son was with me at the admissions office when I did it. And it was really a very cool moment. And then just kind of slowly chipping away and doing the work. And the more art classes I took, I realized this is what I really want to do. Like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to just dabble in craft. I really want to start making art. And the thing was, everything in college for me right now has helped my recovery. Mm-hmm. So writing papers, I used Ann Dowsett Johnston's book Drink and wrote I think it was a really good paper for my English class, and write it about how the marketing of alcohol to the modern woman. Then I reinterpreted that for a speech class I did and gave it in my public speaking class. And then I started making art that had, this painting behind me, this pink one. I painted that when my friend died, and it was a Rothko, and I was channeling my grief through that. It's like school became this place where I could be creative, and it gave me some confidence to do it and share on social media and with friends. And it just became this thing that, like I said, I gave myself permission to say that is who I am. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to be a late bloomer,
Oh, I love that you just said that. It's okay to be a late bloomer. That is the story of my life. And when I was 29, I quit drinking and I went back to business school. Same kind of, similar type of story. But for me, it was, I had failed out when I had gone earlier, and then I wanted to go back and I wanted to take more courses as well. So I specialized in management, but I remember that feeling of going into admissions and feeling like I was the oldest person to ever, go back to school. And I was just going to be 30. So not 44, but at that same time, it's that feeling of, here I am pushing myself into an area where I just feel like I'm so, I'm so out of my element here, but at the same time feeling like I'm doing something that's really pushing me outside of my comfort zone. And I really tapped into something you were saying about how you quit because you got that D. And it made me think of what a perfectionist you sound like, just in terms of the way that you described these epic dinner parties and everything was perfect. And I can only imagine, when I see your art and how you do things and everything you create is so beautifully, perfectly, just done with such expertise. And I love that. But what I think is so interesting, when I connected with you and when I was doing the Recovery Gals Art Exchange with you and Sandra and the other women, you really kept allowing us to release the perfectionism that so many of us want to grab onto as a way to control, because we feel like so much of our lives are out of control. I feel like many people in active addiction find themselves cleaning their homes to absolute spotless perfection, or playing the role of homemaker or mother or whatever, to look to the world as if we are absolutely perfect. And I know Brene Brown does amazing work in this space where she talks about that being such a such a cop out, such a way for us to hide from the world, because it doesn't allow anyone to judge us, right? Like we're putting out this perfect persona, but it's just not the truth of who we really are. And so I love how it's kind of all come around, because you don't require, at least us, to be perfect in what we create art-wise. Are you still hard on yourself? Do you still feel that you have perfectionistic tendencies, or have you released that? Has creativity helped you to release that? I'd like you to explore that a little bit with me.
Yeah, I think that's always a work in progress. And I think that that's the tagline on my website, like, I am a work in progress. And what I do for my gratitude practice, when I write in this journal every day, I write it in a bound journal for a reason. It's bound so that I can't tear it out. I mean, I guess I could, but I commit to myself that when I make this art for that gratitude practice, I misspell words. I don't overthink it. I accidentally, but I don't fix them. It's a practice. It's very much a practice in letting go of that perfectionistic tendency. In school, I talk about this all the time. People are probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but my math class is my teacher, because I've had to take 4 math classes because it's been so long. That class of trying to get the A, like, really nobody's going to care if I get an A in pre-algebra, right? So the lesson over these last 2 years has been to release that. I just need a C to pass. And for some people, even like my son, if he's we don't want to tell him you just need to get a C to pass. We want him to try a little harder. But at this stage of my life and at my age, I just need to get through the math classes so I can move on to university and go study with different art professors. So I had to kind of zoom back and look at the bigger picture and say, it doesn't have to be perfect. But I think that's a process that I work on every single day. I do like really beautiful things, and I like to make beautiful art. A project that I'm working on right now, it's called The Geographic, and it's examining my drinking, and I'm doing abstract landscapes. Abstraction is not perfect. It's messy. It's not clean lines. And then I'm also examining my drinking and the layers of my drinking and the layers of my story on the paint. It's very emotional, and my professor keeps encouraging me to get a little messier, get out of your head. And so it's all a process. So yeah, I'm still working on all of it. I don't have it all figured out, but that is part of it. And then just doing it. I think you just have to sit down and make art or create whatever you're going to create. You just have to do it and finish it.
Yeah, do it and do it and finish it. I was going to say, is it okay to leave things left undone? But I think there is such power to starting something and finishing it, even if when you start and when you finish, it's not what you thought it was going to be. That's okay. You can start something else. But I do think there is such power to starting and finishing something, really closing those loops in order to move to that next stage. I think that's beautiful. I love your work. I love your writing. I love that you do the podcast, the Unruffled podcast with Sandra. And you also did something spectacular in your life called the Ray of Light series. And that was something that I felt really honored to have been asked to share my story. And you created art from that project. So you highlighted 52 women in recovery, you shared our stories, and then you took one of our photographs and then you used mixed medium and created something else out of those images. And it was absolutely beautiful. And I received mine the other day, and I'll show it because I love it. This was a photograph that my favorite photographer here took of me. And I know I'm having some people say, what does that photograph have to do with recovery? And I get that some people might look at me and think that I'm putting this photo out there. But to me, when I had that photograph taken, it was a really vulnerable moment. I'd never done anything like that. And it was really, I had barely been on Facebook. So to put this image out into the world of me that I thought I was only going to be sharing with my partner, but then to share it with other people, just in that it felt raw, it felt vulnerable. And then for you to create what you did with it, It
Mhm.
is a piece of art that I will cherish forever. I absolutely love it. And I love looking at all of the other ones and reading the other stories of the other women that you featured on that blog series. So I encourage anyone listening right now or watching, go over to Tammy's website, and the Ray of Light series is featured on your blog. And it is so amazing to be able to read all of these stories. So I just love how you are, it's like you're incorporating all of these beautiful creative aspects of your life, your writing, your education, what you're doing in school, and then all of this creativity all blending together to create brand new things in the world. And I know that I read when you did that Ray of Light series, you wrote about how challenging it was to get this thing done and to put it out in the world. And you're typically a procrastinator, which I can't believe considering all of the things that you do. But that was something that really spurred you, like that procrastination where all of a sudden it's Thursday night, you got to get this thing done. And you did it every single Friday. You didn't miss a single one. 52 weeks of this. I applaud you for that. That's a huge accomplishment. I'm really proud of you for doing it. And I'm really proud to have been asked to be a part of it. I absolutely love what you've done there.
Thank you. Yeah, keeping my word to myself, finishing it. That's what that was a huge part. And that just, when I was working on my step 6 of my character defects, when I was working the 12 steps, um, 2 of the big ones for me were judgment and procrastination. And I wrote about it for a long time, and my about procrastination, and my sponsor was like, "Are you procrastinating that you're writing about procrastination?" Like, I feel like we need to move on here because I need to call you on this. And I was like, no, I'm realizing how much that plays a role in my life. I don't get gas until it's on EEE. I don't, there's like all of these things that were like popping up. And so I'm really proud of the series for a number of reasons. And when I went to go write my year-end review, I was going to like talk about my techniques and the actual art making. And I was going to talk about all the women, but I thought, I've talked about all the women all year long and feature them. I think I'm actually going to just share like how this helped me. And so when I take on these self-assigned creative projects, it's very much part of my recovery. So doing this geographic series I'm doing now, it's very much helping me with my recovery and analyzing why I drank the way I did, why I drove home from my wine bar to the town that I live in, why moving does not help, the geographic cure that we talk about in the rooms. It's not a cure, it doesn't work. But then I have to like dig deeper. So all of my art keeps revealing to me more about who I am. And that's what I really love about it. And so that's what keeps me making it. And to share it with others and have people connect or to think that's nice or pretty, that is nice. I do appreciate that. But why I make it is for me.
Well, and you can feel how personal it is, and it's why I love your art so much. And I know you sell your art on your website as well. So everyone watching and listening, you're gonna continue to watch this, and then when you're done, you're gonna go to TammySalas.com and check out all of the different things. She has even a really cool tote bag that looks incredible. I think I'm gonna pick that up because it looks like the sturdiest, best library book bag or grocery bag that I've ever seen. So I think I'm gonna be picking that up later today. I love it. I want to keep digging back into your story. When did you start going to AA? Because clearly that was one of the tools, one of the pathways that you chose for your recovery. I want to know when you decided to go to your first meeting.
So like I mentioned earlier, I read Sarah Hepela's Blackout in August of 2015. That month, I had just summited Mount Lassen. I had climbed up to the cloud camp on Mount Rainier with me and my girlfriend and our children, my godchildren. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, was Mount Rainier, and had metal crampons, and it was just, there was glaciers and vertical ice fields. I didn't know fully what I was training for. And when I got there, I was really glad that I did train. So I was on a high of my 6-month sobriety, and I was thinking, I got this. Like, I totally have this, And my girlfriend and I talked about balance. I said, I think I should be a balanced drinker. Like, I feel like I really need to have more balance in my life. And if I quit drinking, isn't that the same all or nothing mentality as a drinker? Like, isn't that just the same? I was totally trying to justify. And she, as we're hiking up the mountain, she said, I think because you removed alcohol from your life is balanced. I don't think you need to be a balanced drinker to be a balanced person. And I thought about that as we were hiking up that ice field, and I was like, huh, okay. So I came home from that trip. I read Sarah Hepela's book. I understood that I was a blackout drinker. And then at the very end, she shared how she was sponsoring a woman. And so through the whole book, I didn't realize, that this was going to be where it led to AA. And so I wrote a blog post on my 7 months of sobriety, and where I questioned, am I an alcoholic? I don't like that word. People don't like that word. Am I that? I don't know. And a former yoga teacher of mine reached out to me in a private message, and she said, hey, have you ever tried a 12-step program? And I said, I don't really know what that is. I knew the words AA, but I didn't understand the 12 steps. So she explained it to me. And then she said, I think you'd be a really great fit for it. I know how you are. I know how you work. I know you really well. I think your personality type would respond to that kind of program. And I said, oh, well, I'll try it because, again, I want the gold star and I want to please somebody. So that was the day after my 7-month sobriety. And I dropped my kid off at soccer practice, and I found a meeting, and I walked in, and there was like 4 people. That was it. And they knew I was new because they knew each other. Right?
There's 4 people in the room.
And so they handed me a big book, they handed me a living sober book, and they handed me a box of Kleenex. And I, because I said, they said, is this your first meeting? I said, yeah. And they said, well, you're going to cry. And I said, no, I'm not. And so I sat down, and I was pissed off. And it was a meditation meeting. So for
why were you pissed off? Because there were only 4 people there?
No, because they told me I was going to cry.
Oh, okay.
They handed me a box of Kleenex, which they were just trying to be nice, but I was mad. I was pissed off. It was my first meeting. And the meeting filled up a little bit with a few more people. But for 20 minutes of that meditation, I just sat there and was fuming and trying to figure out how I could get out of there. But I was glued to my seat, right? And when it was all over, everybody grabbed hands and said a prayer that I didn't know. And this nice woman next to me, she said, that was a lot, right? And I said, yeah, that was a lot. And she said, just keep coming back. And I didn't know that was a thing they said in the rooms because it was my first meeting. But I thought, when I left there, I thought, that woman was so nice. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to find a different meeting. So then the next day I went to one in a different town. And then the next day I went to a different one. And I just went to a few, and I found one that I liked. And I was riveted by the people in the rooms telling the truth. Mm-hmm. And as a storyteller or someone who likes to read about the human condition, I was fascinated. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning, I stayed in my seat because I wanted to hear what those people had to say. Mm-hmm. I wasn't ready to say anything, but that's what kept me there. Mm-hmm. And I've been there since. I just had my 3-year sobriety anniversary or birthday or whatever you call it. And so yeah, it's been a really important part of my recovery.
I make this point a lot because although I didn't use AA to recover myself, I know so many people who have tried a meeting here or tried one there, not connected, and then never gone back. And I always just encourage people, keep seeking, keep searching something that you can grab onto. And maybe it might not be that first AA meeting, but there might be another one that speaks to you, that it could be a nice foray and a great way, even if you don't use it forever. And again, I'm not pushing AA because I didn't use the rooms, but I understand that there can be that feeling of, if you don't connect to that first one, then forget it. Then obviously it's not for me. And then people just go back to drinking. And that's, we're no farther ahead. So trying different rooms, trying different meetings, connecting with different people can really be helpful. Even sometimes what I'm really finding from so many of these conversations is using it as a stepping stone. Not everybody stays in AA forever, but it can be a really great way to connect right away with people who understand you, and to be able, like you say, to hear those stories, to know that we're not alone. That is so key. That was so, I really struggled in my first years of sobriety. I just, as I mention all the time, I just abandoned the truth of my life. I just pretended it didn't exist because I felt so alone, because I didn't try to seek out any type of tribes in the world. And I really think that things could have been more comfortable for me. I could have felt less other and really had a better experience in recovery in those early years had I made an effort to find people who were going through the same things. I'm curious about your relationship with your husband. If you don't mind talking about that, you talked about that night where, he'd wanted to clean the wine glasses and you tried to write that down, and that you had always been picking fights. And I'm curious, is your relation, I love that you're still married. Is it that does he talk about that time when you were drinking and how things are so much better now? Like, how does your relationship look sober versus how did it look when you were drinking?
Gosh, well, we'd have to ask him how he thinks about that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like night and day in terms of I'm present now. I'm present now.
Mm-hmm.
Not perfect. We've been in therapy for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of damage over those years of being a mom that wasn't fully present with her kid, of disappointing my husband, of not showing up for him in a way that, he thought I was going to. So it's all still very tender and raw. I don't really feel comfortable talking about all of it,
Mm-mm.
but we're still together. The goal is to stay married. But you change a lot in recovery.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the person that he married, or I'm not that girl that he met on that bar stool that night so long ago, 20 years ago. I'm not the same person. So yeah, it's a work in progress as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As they are, as relationships are. And what about the relationship with your son? How, obviously he hears your podcast. He knows that you didn't want to be pregnant. And I'm wondering how those conversations have gone.
Yeah, he does not listen to my podcast.
Okay.
And he does not know that I didn't want to be pregnant.
Okay.
So he does not know that. But I would talk to him about that. I mean, he does know that he was a happy surprise. So perhaps he knows.
Mm-hmm.
But it's much better. I can't imagine parenting my son right now. He's 14. I've been sober for 3 years. When I quit, I'm so grateful, because I would be the biggest hypocrite parenting him right now and drinking the way that I was, and having people over and putting him aside, and just, I did that for a lot of years, where everyone else, being the life of the party, was what was important.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did my amends to people, and he was on the list of somebody I needed to make amends to, and at the suggestion of my sponsor, you don't make amends to your children necessarily, you live those amends. So that's what I do for him. I live my amends and to my husband as well, that I am not that person. I get to show up and take him to tennis practice. I'm the first one up in the house in the morning, so I take him to carpool. I get to cheer him on when he's playing a match and not embarrass him. I get to drop him off and pick him up from a school dance, whereas before I would never be able to pick him up from a school dance at 10:30 at night. Like, that would be off the table. That wouldn't be my role. I don't know that he's going to be grateful that I quit drinking until maybe he's much older and he can look back and think like, wow, that was a good thing that mom did. I went into the rooms for my husband and my son originally to kind of like show them I could be this better person. I stayed in the rooms for me, so now I go there for me. I don't need the gold star from my husband to stay sober. I wanted to prove it to him so long ago. But yeah, they get the byproduct of me doing all this work. But really now it's for me that I do this work, so they get to benefit from it.
I think it's such a great point that we do this work for ourselves. I mean, there is no greater relationship or more important one than the one we have with ourselves. But then when we heal and when we repair and when we work on ourselves in such profound ways in recovery, when we don't just put the drink or the drug down, but when we actually try to get down to the pain and what we were using the drug or the alcohol to numb, I think it automatically improves all of those other relationships, just because we are more whole and more present. And no matter what, people feel that and they sense that, and they treat us differently when we are treating ourselves differently. So I am just so glad that you got sober, that you are a woman living in recovery so beautifully and so creatively. You are inspiring so many other women to do the same through living in gratitude, in that place of truly being grateful for what we already have and looking for ways to find more gratitude, and being able to, sharing with all of us to let us know that we're able to express ourselves creatively, and that we can do that, even if we don't feel like we are creative people, that we all have gifts and talents that we can share in whatever creative way that we can muster. So whether that's knitting or crocheting or painting or sculpting or cooking or writing, whatever it is, it's amazing what happens when we stop using our hands to just pick up a glass or a drug, and instead make something beautiful out of what can come out and through us. So I think that what you're doing to help us to all attract that into our lives and to pull that out of ourselves is really important work. So I applaud you for everything that you're doing. Tammy, if people want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways to find you?
Well, they can go to my website that you mentioned earlier, TammySalas.com. And every Monday, we release a new podcast, the Unruffled podcast, that I co-host with Sandra Primo. And I know she did one of these interviews with you, and she talked a bit about the podcast, but we're just loving it. Every week we're committing to creating it, and it's not perfect. That's a lesson in imperfection and trying to just put it out there. Of course, we spend a lot of time and energy and research into it, but we also, dogs are barking and cats are meowing during the show, and we just are accepting that. So that's very much part of our recovery. So you can tune in and listen to that. You can get downloaded on iTunes or anywhere people get their podcasts. And yeah, I think, and on Instagram, I live on Instagram. That's kind of my place. I love it. I share there a lot. I interact with people a lot. That's where you can find me.
I love it. Well, thank you. Sorry, say that again.
I just at Tammi Salas on Instagram.
I love it. Thank you so much for being with me today. Your story is incredible. I know that so many women can relate to that, what we call that gray area drinking, where you sort of wonder, am I at this one end or the other of the spectrum? I don't drink every day, but I am blacking out. So am I, and so I know that this is going to connect with so many people, and just also that creative piece. I really wanted to capture that with you. Thank you so much for being with me today, Tammy. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for the work that you're doing. It's really important.
Thank you. To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.